Sunday of Lent, Year A. Of all the miracles Jesus worked, the raising of Lazarus ranks as the most astonishing to the people of his time. Traditional Jewish belief had it that the soul of a dead person somehow remains with the body for 3 days. After 3 days, the soul departs finally from the body, never to return. And that is when corruption sets in. When Martha objects to the opening of the tomb and says, "Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead for 4 days," she is expressing the common view that this is now a hopeless situation. G.K. Chesterton once said, "Hope means hoping when things are hopeless, or it is no virtue at all." In traditional Jewish mentality, bringing back to life a person who was already 4 days dead and decaying was as unthinkable as the prophet Ezekiel's vision, in which the grey, dry bones of the dead are miraculously restored to life. For the early Christians, this story of the raising of Lazarus was a pointer to the resurrection of Jesus. Jesus rose on the 3rd day. His body never saw corruption, even if it had reached the 3rd day, the day of corruption and of vital impossibility. For us, this miracle is a challenge to never give up hope, even in the hopeless situations in which we find ourselves as individuals, as a church, or as a society or nation. It is never too late for God to revive and revitalize a person, a church, a community, a country. But first, we must learn to cooperate with Him. At such a time when hope seems to be hopeless, our faith is the only thing we can hold on to. In the Gospel of today, there is no one in the story, not even Mary or Martha, who believed that Jesus could bring Lazarus back to life after 4 days dead. The faith here is not the cabbage type of faith that some of us live. Rather, the emphasis in the story is on how we cooperate with a miracle-working God. The emphasis is placed on practical obedience and doing God's will. To do God's will, we must first love the will, love God, and love our neighbor as ourselves. Now you can see how the 3 theological virtues interplay here. You cannot hope for what you hate, and while you are hoping, you must continue to practice your faith. To effect the miracle, Jesus issues 3 commands, and all of them are obeyed to the letter. This is how the miracle happens. First, Jesus says, "Roll away the stone," and they do it. Of course, during his own resurrection, the stone will be rolled miraculously and by no person of flesh. We may ask, in the case of Lazarus, did the people understand why they should do this heavy work of rolling away the tombstone to expose a stinking corpse? You bet they didn't. But it was their faith in Jesus, expressing itself not through intellectual agreement or arguments with Him, but through practical agreement with Him through obedience. Why didn't Jesus command the stone to roll away all by itself without bothering the people? Why did He not, as some said, prevent the death of His friend Lazarus? Why? We don't quite know. All we know is that divine power seems always to be activated by human cooperation, yet stifled by non-cooperation. God's miracle comes in only when we would have done our own part. He knits the 2 fish and 5 loaves in order to perform the miracle of multiplication. We need bread and wine in order to celebrate the Eucharist. Yet it would be absurd for us to command God to do things we can do ourselves, like feeding the hungry and housing the homeless. The second command which Jesus gives is directed to the dead Lazarus. Lazarus, come out! And the dead man came out. We do not know the details of what transpired in the tomb or what conversation went between Jesus and Lazarus in the innermost of their beings. Of course, we never know what goes on inside friends, even when we pretend to claim the knowledge. But all we know is that Lazarus, whom people had considered food for the worms, did obey Jesus and did come out. From this, we know that Jesus' word of command is followed by immediate obedience and action. Jesus is Lord both of the living and the dead. Lazarus groped his way out of the dark tomb, even with his hands and feet tied up in bandages and his face all wrapped up. Yet he still can see his way out of the tomb. It is not about physical eyes here. No matter how much we try to block somebody's vision, his faith can still make him see. Here we see that even a man rotting away in the tomb can still do something to help himself. A man blinded by human agents can still see through the band that ties his face. No matter how deep you think you have been buried by your troubles, no matter how deep you think you have been in deep shit, at the command of Jesus, there is still hope. What is more difficult to do? To come out from the grave or to unbind oneself? Certainly the former. But Jesus still asks help for Lazarus in the latter. He continues to ask you to one more time help those whom you think you have helped already. The third and last command again is addressed to the people. Unbind him and let him go. If Lazarus could stumble himself out of the tomb with his eyes tied, there was no way he could unbind himself. Some obstacles are more than others. By unbinding Lazarus and setting him free from the death bands, the community is doing their own part in accepting Lazarus back as one of them. How often do we bind off people from our lives and declare that we have nothing to do with them again? Figuratively, we bind them in the tombs we have built for them. We roll heavy stones over their graves and go on with life as if those people never existed in the first place. And some people would dare say, we will meet in the grave. Horrible. What should have been the reason for binding someone before burying? Probably it was due to the fear that he could still come back to life and maybe cause havoc. Sometimes we are afraid of our own shadows, of things that no more exist. In Jesus, physical binding is nothing. He can simply ask us to do the unbinding. What is heavy and which He alone can do is spiritual unbinding, giving back spiritual life. This is what He asks from us today as we meditate on the resurrection of Lazarus. No matter what you are going through at the moment, if we remain faithful to God, dry bones will still live. Life will come back. Father Dufe, Joseph, Lent.